My name is Lauren Whitaker. I'm 28 years old, and last week I received a certified letter from a law firm in Charlotte. The letter said my parents had sold the family business and that the proceeds millions were being divided equally between their 3 children. But that's not what stopped my breath. What really caught me off guard was that I was included at all. Because 16 years ago, my parents and my brothers left me behind at a gas station in Idaho. On purpose. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It was supposed to be a celebration. I had just graduated with a degree in graphic design, tired, hopeful, and unsure of what was next. The plan was a road trip 7 days through the Smoky Mountains, just the 5 of us crammed into Dad's SUV. Mom said it was a family reset. I knew better. It was a tradition wrapped in dysfunction. They were in rare form from the start. As I loaded my suitcase, my brother Dylan smirked and said, "You remember to pack deodorant this time?" Evan laughed like it was original, even though that joke had been recycled since I was 16. That time, I'd forgotten a swimsuit on a Florida trip, and they'd made me sit on the beach in cargo shorts for 3 days, refusing to stop at any store along the way. That was the Whitaker brand of love nicknames, mockery, and public humiliation. I was the family punchline. If it wasn't my looks, it was my sensitivity. If it wasn't my goals, it was my dreamer attitude. And if I ever protested, I was told to lighten up. "It's just a joke, Lauren," they'd say. "Can't you take a joke?" I tried. For years I tried. I didn't have much of a choice. My parents still paid the rent on my apartment in Charlotte. My part-time coffee shop job barely covered groceries, and even though I had started applying to creative agencies in Asheville and Atlanta, my mom had made her opinion clear. "It's cute you want to do art, honey, but it's not realistic." The plan was that I'd design marketing materials for the family business Whitaker Insurance and Associates, and eventually work full-time under Dylan the heir apparent. Evan handled advertising. I was the last puzzle piece expected to click into place quietly, so I said yes to the road trip. I told myself maybe they were trying. Maybe a vacation would melt the ice that had settled in my chest over the years. I packed my camera, a sketchbook, and that old part of me that still wanted to be seen. The first day of driving was uneventful until lunch. Dylan lost my phone for 45 minutes before revealing it had been in his hoodie the entire time. "Just keeping you sharp," he said, handing it back like he deserved gratitude. Evan ate my sandwich while I dozed in the back seat and told me to be faster next time. By the time we reached the motel in Tennessee, I was vibrating with tension. I overheard my parents talking through the thin wall between our rooms. "She needs to toughen up," my dad said. "The world's not going to pamper her. She's too fragile," my mom agreed. "If this trip doesn't shake her awake, I don't know what will." The next morning, the mood shifted. Everyone was suddenly pleasant. Evan offered me the front seat. Dylan asked if I wanted to pick the playlist. Mom smiled too much. I should have known then. By early afternoon, we crossed into Idaho. "Gas stop," Dad announced as he turned into a station on the edge of a tiny town called Silver Glen. It was one of those aging places with faded signage and dusty windows. Nothing but wide skies and sun-bleached land. "I'm going to the bathroom," I said. "Anyone want anything?" "Coke," Dylan muttered. "Jerky," said Evan. "Nothing," Mom replied, fixing her lipstick in the mirror. Inside, I used the restroom, picked up the snacks, and made small talk with the woman behind the register. Her name tag read Shelby. Her voice was kind, and for 30 seconds, I felt human. When I stepped back outside into the heat, the SUV was gone. I turned in a slow circle, checked behind the pumps, walked around the back. Nothing. At first, I thought they were pulling one of their usual stunts. Maybe they'd moved the car. Maybe they were watching from somewhere nearby, laughing, waiting. I called Dad. No answer. Mom. Voicemail. Evan. Ignored. Finally, Dylan picked up. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Oh, about 20 minutes down the road now," he said casually. I could hear laughter in the background. "Turn around. This isn't funny. Let's see if you can make it home on your own," he said. And then Brett yelled something about survival of the fittest. Click. A text arrived. A photo of the 4 of them in the SUV grinning like kids on a roller coaster. Caption, hope you find dinner tonight, sis. I called again. Every number went to voicemail. And just like that, they were gone. I stood there clutching a plastic bag full of snacks, staring into the horizon, like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. My phone battery was at 18%. I had $43 in my wallet. My suitcase was in their trunk. I hadn't even brought a charger. For 3 hours, I sat on the curb outside that station, letting the heat bake through my bones, waves of panic rising and receding. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a follow-up message. Some sign they'd turn around. Maybe they'd driven a mile up the road and would reappear chastened. Nothing. Just one more text from my dad. Figure it out. Call us when you're back. That's when Shelby came outside. You okay, hon? She asked, wiping her hands on her apron. The truth came out between sobs. My family left me here, I told her. They think it's a lesson. They think it's funny. She stared for a moment, then said quietly, That's not funny. That's abuse. Shelby didn't just nod sympathetically and disappear back into the gas station like I half expected. She sat down beside me on the curb, arms resting on her knees, and said, You want to come inside and charge your phone? We've got an outlet near the register. I think I nodded. I think I said thank you. Honestly, that part's a blur. What I do remember clearer than anything was the moment she picked up the store phone and called someone named Gloria. Hey, she said, turning slightly away from me, trying to keep her voice low. You still renting that spare room? Got a young woman here who needs a safe place to sleep tonight. Her family? Yeah. Real bad. That was the first time anyone had ever called what they did to me real bad. I'd always grown up thinking it was just me being too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. That was the family refrain. And I wore it like a scarlet letter. It wasn't just the big things like being abandoned in Silver Glen. It was all the things before it. Like how every birthday of mine had some cruel twist. My 10th. They pretended everyone forgot and only surprised me after I'd spent hours crying alone in my room. My middle school graduation, they showed up 45 minutes late, claiming they'd lost track of time. At prom, they gave my date the wrong address and laughed when I got stood up. Just a joke, they'd say. You have to learn to take a joke. Mom was subtler than Dad. She didn't yell. She didn't prank. She poisoned. That dress is almost flattering, she once told me, as I walked out for senior photos. If you lost 15 pounds, it might really shine. Or my favorite, you'd be so pretty if you fixed that skin and learned how to smile properly. Dad. He laughed the loudest whenever Dylan or Evan made a fool of me. It was bonding for them. A shared language of mockery. Our family dinners weren't meals, they were roasts where I was always the headliner. It wasn't until I sat on a cracked vinyl stool in Shelby's quiet gas station that I realized how messed up all of that really was. Shelby brought over a paper plate with a grilled cheese sandwich and a pickle spear. On the house, she said, You look like you haven't eaten since breakfast. I hadn't. While my phone charged, I scrolled through old photos, looking for comfort in something familiar. But all I could see were images with captions like Family Goals or Reynolds Road Trip 2023, and suddenly I wanted to throw the thing across the room. These weren't memories. They were artifacts from a gaslit life. Gloria showed up 20 minutes later in a weathered green Subaru, wearing a denim shirt and linen pants that somehow made her look both casual and wise. Her hair was a silvery white cloud pulled into a low bun, and her eyes took me in with the kind of quiet curiosity you only see in people who listen before they speak. I hear you've had one hell of a day, she said. I couldn't even answer. I just nodded my hands, still wrapped around the now empty plate. I've got a room, nothing fancy. Bed dresser window view of the street. But it's yours for now. The word yours caught in my throat like a bone. Her house was 3 blocks from the gas station, a butter-yellow Craftsman with a porch swing and a wind chime made of old silver spoons. Inside smelled like cinnamon and old books like comfort. She showed me the room. It had a twin bed covered in a faded quilt, a small desk, and a second-hand dresser missing one knob. I thought it was perfect. That night, after borrowing a toothbrush and a nightgown, I lay under the blanket and stared at the ceiling for hours. My phone was at 92%, but I didn't want to turn it back on. I didn't want to read another text from my mom about tough love, or my dad claiming this was training for real life. Still, I checked. I couldn't help it. One message from Dylan Day 2 of Lauren's great adventure. Any bears yet? Another from Mom. You'll thank us one day. And one from Dad called your apartment manager. Rent's on hold. Hope that lights a fire. I put the phone face down on the pillow beside me and whispered out loud to no one. They really think this is okay. Gloria made pancakes in the morning. Real ones with crispy edges and warm syrup. While we ate, she asked, "What's your plan for today?" I shrugged. "Figure out how to get back to Charlotte, I guess." She looked at me over the rim of her coffee mug. "Do you want to—" That stopped me. Did I? I mean, logically, yes. That's where my stuff was. That's where my job was, if you could call making $9.75 an hour a job. That's where my friends had been. Though most had drifted thanks to Mom always discouraging anything that pulled me too far from the family circle. "I don't know," I said. "Well," she said, "if you want to stay here a little while, I charge $300 a month for the room, but you can work it off at my bookstore if you'd rather trade time than money." "You have a bookstore?" "Downtown," she said. "The Oak and Quill. We've been open for 30 years, give or take. It's a little dusty. Website's embarrassing, but it's mine." My heart did something weird in my chest. A bookstore with a bad website. I had literally just graduated in design. That wasn't just a coincidence, it felt like an invitation. "I could help with that," I said before I could stop myself. "The site. I mean, if you want." She grinned. "Then we'll start there." Later that day, I walked into every business along Silver Glen's main drag and asked if they were hiring. Most weren't. But the Bluebird Cafe, a mom-and-pop diner with powder blue booths and the smell of bacon grease clinging to the walls, said they needed someone for breakfast shifts. "Can you start tomorrow?" asked Rachel, the manager and single mom, with tattoos on both forearms and eyes that didn't miss a thing. "Yeah," I said already, picturing myself with aching feet and a notepad full of coffee orders. That night, as I crawled into bed sore from walking and raw from too many introductions, I whispered again, not in sadness, but in disbelief. "I'm still here." Silver Glen woke up early. The sun slipped through Gloria's lace curtains before 6, and by 6:30, the birds were in full conversation outside my window. My alarm hadn't even gone off yet, but my nerves had. It was my first day at the Bluebird Cafe, and I hadn't waited tables since a 1-month summer job during high school that ended with me sobbing in the walk-in freezer after Dylan Prank called the place pretending to be an irate customer. This time was different. This time there was no one here to laugh at me when I fumbled. No one waiting for me to fail. I tied my borrowed sneakers tight, pulled my hair into a bun, and walked the 3 blocks to the diner with the kind of quiet resolve you develop when no one's coming to save you. The Bluebird was already humming. Locals sat in their usual booths, mugs of coffee, steaming newspapers folded just so. Rachel handed me an apron, a notepad, and a crash course list written on a napkin. "Just keep the coffee full and your eyes open," she said, "and they'll love you." The first shift passed in a blur, plates of pancakes, refilled mugs, names to remember. My feet ached, and I spilled a tiny bit of syrup on someone's shoe, but no one yelled. No one mocked. A man in flannel even left me a $5 tip with a note that read, "Welcome to Silver Glen, Lauren." Back at the Oak and Quill that afternoon, Gloria had cleared space at the back counter for me to set up her ancient desktop. The website was as bad as she'd warned. Black text on beige stock images of book covers and no events calendar. "My nephew made it in 2008, she admitted. "He's now a yoga teacher in Oregon." I smiled. "We can do better." And just like that, I had 2 jobs and something that felt like purpose. That week blurred. I woke before the sun poured coffee, until 2 napped for 20 minutes, then biked to the bookstore and taught myself how to breathe again between stacks of paperbacks and Gloria's calming hum. Each day I checked my phone less. Each night I remembered something new that hurt, like the time I'd won 2nd place in a regional design competition, and Evan had said, "That's cute, but 2nd place is just the first loser." O.R. When I overheard my mom telling my aunt that I'd always been the emotional one, like it was a diagnosis, not a description. When you live long enough under the weight of other people's opinions, your own voice gets buried. But that week, I started hearing myself again. Rachel became an unlikely confidant. One day after the lunch rush, she found me sitting on a milk crate in the back, my head in my hands. "Family stuff," she asked. I nodded. "Wanna talk?" And so I did. Not the whole saga, just the basics. How they'd left me, the messages, the rent cut off. Her expression didn't change much as I spoke, but when I finally stopped, she leaned against the wall and said, "Sounds like they did you a favor." I blinked. "What?" "Those people. That's not love. That's control with a laugh track. And now you're out. You've got a clean slate. Not everyone gets that." I didn't know it then, but that sentence, "you've got a clean slate," would become my lifeline. A few days later, Gloria handed me a check. "For your work so far," she said. "It's not much, but the new flyers are already bringing in people who haven't stepped in here in years." The flyer was simple, an upcoming poetry night, with clean lines, soft colors, and a modern serif font. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. My design, my name in the corner. I almost cried when I saw it hanging in the window. That was the week I stopped checking my phone, stopped waiting for an apology, stopped hoping they'd come back. I used the library computer to create a new email account, one that had no ties to Charlotte, no digital fingerprints for them to follow. Then, I sent messages to a few professors I trusted, explained my situation vaguely, and asked if they'd be willing to serve as references for freelance work. Every single one said yes. I posted my portfolio on a design forum and applied to 3 remote gigs on a freelancer site. I didn't think anything would come of it, but within a week, I had my first offer, $150, to redesign a logo for a candle shop 2 towns over. I took it, worked late into the night at Gloria's kitchen table, cried when the payment came through. It wasn't about the money, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't just the sum of what they said I was. I wasn't too fragile, or too naive, or too artsy for her own good. I was capable. The next month, I saved enough to pay Gloria rent in cash. She tried to decline it. I slid it across the table anyway. "This is my home now," I said. "I want to treat it like one." Silver Glen shifted from backdrop to belonging. People started greeting me by name. I memorized the regulars' coffee orders. I started biking everywhere up the Ridge Trail past the old railway museum, through the back roads that smelled like pine and morning. And then one evening, as I was closing up the bookstore, I caught my reflection in the front window. Same face, same hair, same brown eyes. But something in the way I stood had changed. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for approval, not for rescue, not for anything. I was standing still, and for the first time in my life, it felt like movement. The thing about survival is that it's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. No confetti drops when you pay rent on time, or buy your own groceries for the first time without panic. No gold medals for doing your laundry, without your mother's sarcastic commentary about wrinkled feminist fashion. But every small act started to feel like its own ceremony. Buying a second-hand desk lamp, printing out flyers for Gloria's book club, replacing my cracked phone case. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was reclaiming autonomy piece by piece. Still, I kept waiting for the fear to show up again. That tightening in my chest I used to get before walking into a family dinner, not knowing if I'd be mocked or ignored. I waited for it during my shifts at the Bluebird Cafe, or when I sent designs off to clients worried they'd say I wasn't good enough. But Silver Glen didn't bite. People said thank you. They paid on time. They smiled when they saw me on the sidewalk. It's amazing how disorienting kindness can be when you've been raised on condescension. One Saturday, Rachel invited me over for dinner. Her son Max was 7 and obsessed with astronomy. We spent an hour on their porch pointing out constellations. He asked if I'd ever seen a shooting star. I said no. "You will," he said confidently, like he had some direct line to the cosmos. Over veggie lasagna and store-brand lemonade, Rachel asked me, "Do you ever think about going back?" I knew she meant Charlotte. I looked down at my plate. They cut off my rent. "I'm probably evicted already." "Yeah," she said, but I meant, "Do you want to go back?" I shook my head. "I don't think so. I used to want them to realize what they did was wrong, to apologize. But now, I just want to keep moving forward." "That's called growing up, kid," she said with a grin. "Welcome to it." Back at the Oak and Quill, Gloria had just gotten in a batch of used art books. She handed me one with sticky notes poking out of the pages. "Thought you might like this. Got some poster inspiration." I devoured it. I spent that night sketching on the floor of my room, new layout ideas, typography experiments, mock-ups for businesses I admired in town. My brain was on fire in a way I hadn't felt since college. That's when I started seeing Cal. Well, not seeing him like that, not yet. At first, it was just Gloria saying, "You should meet Cal Miller. He's a web developer. Could use someone with your eye for detail." He showed up at the shop 2 days later, wearing a graphic tee that read, "Control plus Z is my religion," and a tired smile that made him look like he hadn't slept in a year. His laptop had stickers for obscure coding tools and a faded Pokemon logo. "Show me your stuff," he said after a 10-minute chat. I pulled up my site. He scrolled through, slowly nodding. "You've got good bones. Layout instincts are strong. Want to learn some code?" "Sure," I said, more out of curiosity than confidence. We started meeting twice a week, me with my sketchpad, him with his keyboard, drinking burnt coffee from the Bluebird, and talking about how bad most small-town websites looked. "People here have great businesses," he said. "They just don't know how to show it online." That became our unofficial mission. He brought the function, I brought the form. Together, we helped a florist 2 towns over double her wedding bookings with a new brand package, then a local bakery, then a mechanic shop. Word spread. I wasn't rich. I wasn't even stable yet. But I was building something. One night, as Cal and I wrapped up a site launch, he said, "You ever think about starting your own agency?" The question hit me like a dare. "Not really," I said. "I mean, who would take me seriously?" He raised an eyebrow. "The 5 clients you have already did." That night, I opened a blank Google Doc and typed the words New Horizon Design Studio. Just a title, but it felt like the first chapter of something. And then, just as things were starting to feel possible again, Dylan found me. I was in Nashville for a client meeting. The drive was long, the coffee overpriced, and my anxiety high, first out-of-town project, first time staying in a hotel alone. I'd just finished lunch at a cafe near the river when I heard my name. "Lauren." I turned. He looked exactly the same. Pressed shirt, 2 perfect hair. That smirk he'd used since high school, the one that always looked like he knew a secret at your expense. "Holy hell," he said. "It is you." I froze. Every instinct screamed to run. Instead, I stood. He didn't ask. He just sat down across from me like no time had passed. "We've been looking for you," he said, "for over a year." I wasn't hiding, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "I left." "There's a difference. You didn't even say goodbye. You didn't even stop the car." He flinched. I took a long sip of my drink, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "Mom's been worried," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "She told me to thank her one day for abandoning me. I've yet to feel grateful." Dylan sighed as if he were the one exhausted by all this. "You could have called. Dad was convinced you were just trying to teach us a lesson." "No, I was trying to survive." He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Took in the business casual outfit, the client folder on the table, the confidence I didn't have when he last saw me. "You look different," he said. "I am different." He leaned forward. "Come home." I laughed, not loud, just bitter. "I am home." And I stood left my untouched pastry and walked away without another word. I didn't cry until I got back to my hotel room. It wasn't just Dylan showing up. It was the way he slid into my space, so sure he had the right. As if the abandonment never happened, or worse, had happened to him. As if I was just taking my time, punishing them for a joke that got a little out of hand. But what really gutted me was how fast my body remembered. My hands trembled like they used to before Sunday dinners. My throat tightened the same way it had when Dad used to call me too emotional for crying during family meetings. That entire night in Nashville, I was furious with Dylan with my parents, but mostly with myself for feeling like that scared, scrambling girl all over again. The next morning, I sent an email. Subject: final contact. To Mom, Dad, Dylan, Evan. I am alive, safe, and building a life I'm proud of. I do not want reconciliation. I do not want to be contacted. I do not forgive what happened, not just in Silver Glen, but every incident leading up to it. If you continue trying to reach me, I will consider it harassment. Any attempt to interfere with my life, my work, or my relationships will be met with legal action. This is not up for debate. Lauren. I read it 10 times, sat with it. Then I hit send. Blocked their emails again. Blocked the numbers Dylan had used in Nashville. And then I closed my laptop and walked out of the hotel room without a plan, just needing air. It was drizzling in Nashville, one of those half rains where the sky doesn't fully commit. I ducked into a little bookstore on 9th Avenue, ordered tea, and sat in the back between true crime and travel essays. The clerk didn't ask questions, just smiled. Let me be. That space to just be, it felt like gold. When I got back to Silver Glen 2 days later, I walked into the Oak and Quill, pulled Gloria into a hug, and said, "I'm ready." She smiled like she already knew what I meant. Over the next few months, I filed paperwork for New Horizon Design Studio. I worked out of the upstairs nook in the Oak and Quill, stacked with coffee mugs and swatches of color palettes. Cal helped me set up invoicing software and a portfolio site. Rachel introduced me to 3 business owners in the next town over. I no longer needed the bluebird shifts, but I kept them anyway for a while because the rhythm, the community, the familiar creak of the back door after deliveries, it all grounded me. Max came in after school sometimes and asked when I was going to show him more constellations. I bought him a glow-in-the-dark star chart for his birthday. He cried when he opened it. The thing is, life didn't change in one big swoop. There was no cinematic montage. It was emails and deadlines. It was learning how to price myself without guilt. It was awkward networking events where I stood near the cookie table too long. It was small invoices, late payments, one client who ghosted. But I kept going because I wasn't building a business just to prove something to my family anymore. I was building it to prove something to me. Gloria hosted a launch night for my new studio. It was informal string lights across the back of the bookstore finger foods from the cafe flyers I printed myself. But people showed up. People clapped. Cal gave a short speech where he said, "I've never met someone who went from, 'maybe I can' to 'I already did,' so fast." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. That night, I walked home to my tiny studio above the hardware store. My first solo apartment. It smelled like wood polish and ambition. I set my new business cards on the nightstand next to the little succulent Gloria gave me, with a handwritten note that read, "You bloom wherever you're planted." That phrase stuck with me. It became the first line of the mission statement on New Horizons' website. A month later, I had 5 recurring clients. By month 310, Cal and I collaborated more officially, splitting bigger jobs. He'd build the bones, I'd dress them. We became a bit of a duo around town. People started calling us the creative department of Silver Glen. Then came the article. Business West was doing a feature on small-town entrepreneurs. They found my name through a wedding planner in Boise who liked the site I'd done for a florist. The interview was casual over the phone. I didn't say much about my family, just that I'd moved to Idaho under unexpected circumstances and built something from scratch. The magazine sent a photographer. I posed on the porch of the Oak and Quill, then, in front of my studio arms, folded sun behind me. I felt tall in that photo, taller than I'd ever been in Charlotte. The issue came out 2 weeks later. 4 pages. Color spread. New Horizon Design Studio, elevating small businesses in the Mountain West. It hit shelves, and within 3 days, my inbox was full. That's when the letters started. The first was from my mother. The envelope had familiar handwriting, like a ghost I never invited in. She'd read the article, said she was proud, said Dad was too, though he'd never say it aloud. She wanted to talk. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Then came a postcard from Evan. A phone call from a number I didn't recognize, which I let go to voicemail. This time I didn't tremble. I didn't pace. I held the power and I wasn't letting it go. Rachel stopped me in the diner one afternoon. "Some lady called here, asking if you worked mornings." I looked up. "She said she was your mom." Rachel added, her voice careful. "Thanks," I said. "You can tell her I don't work here anymore." That weekend I drafted another email. Not to them, just for myself. A reminder. It read, "You do not owe anyone a second chance at your expense." Then I hit save, pinned it to my desktop, and got back to work. Spring crept into Silver Glen, slowly, like it wasn't quite sure it was welcome. Snow lingered on the edges of rooftops through March, and the streets smelled like melting ice and old pine needles. I didn't mind. My days were full design briefs, client calls, bookstore events, walks to the cafe. Life had built its own rhythm, a gentle, steady beat. And then my mother showed up. I wasn't prepared. Not really. I walked into the office one Tuesday afternoon after a strategy meeting with Cal, and there she was sitting in the small waiting area outside the design studio's main room, flipping through an old issue of the magazine that had featured me. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown. Her blonde hair was pinned perfectly like always. Her blouse was cream silk. Her lipstick matched her shoes. I was immediately 10 years old again, awkward, nervous, adjusting my sleeves to hide my arms, waiting for her to tell me how I could look better if I just tried a little. But I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize for making her wait. "Lauren," she said, standing. "You look—" "Why are you here?" I asked, keeping my voice low but firm. "I wanted to see you," she said. "I wanted to see what you've built." The article didn't feel like enough. "It's been years," I said, unmoved. "What made now the time?" She hesitated. "Your father's health isn't great. He won't admit it, but I thought, maybe we shouldn't leave things like this." I gestured toward my office door. "We can talk inside. 5 minutes." She followed me in. Her heels clicked across the hardwood floor, echoing a rhythm I hadn't heard in nearly 6 years. She looked around at the framed client work on the walls, the sleek desk, the layout board, with mood boards for a real estate branding package. She scanned it all like she was inspecting a hotel lobby. "This is impressive," she said. I sat. "Thanks. But I'm guessing you didn't come all this way for interior design tips?" Her face softened. But I knew that expression. It was her I'm trying face, the one she used with waiters she wanted to charm, or friends she barely tolerated. "I wanted to tell you I'm sorry," she said finally. "For what happened, for what we did." "It was cruel." I didn't answer. She continued. "We thought it would be corrective, like a wake-up call." I realize now how insane that sounds. I crossed my arms. "It doesn't just sound insane, it was abuse." She winced. "I know, I do. Your father and I didn't know how to raise a daughter who felt things so deeply. You were always so sensitive." "I was human," I said. "That's not a flaw." She looked away. "I'm not interested in relitigating the past," I added. "If you're looking for absolution, I don't have it to give." "I'm not," she said quickly. "I'm just trying." That word landed heavy, because for years I had been trying to earn love, trying to be less, trying to shrink. And now here she was, finally tasting what it was like to be on the outside looking in. "Lauren, your father regrets what happened," she said. "He'd never say it aloud, but the decision to include you in the business sale, it was his." That surprised me. I had assumed the money came from guilt, or maybe legal obligation. I never expected him to push for fairness. I leaned back. "It doesn't change anything, not really." "I know," she said, her voice tight. "But we wanted you to have your share. Your name is on the paperwork, no strings." "Are you expecting a thank you?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "Just maybe a beginning." I was quiet for a while. She didn't fill the silence. That was new. Finally, I said, "I'm happy here. I've built something solid. I have people who love me, not for what I can do for them, but for who I am. And I don't want to lose that by opening doors that might still be toxic." She nodded. "I understand." "I don't think you do," I said gently. "But I appreciate the effort." She stood slowly, like she knew the moment was over. "Your brothers miss you." I met her eyes. "Do they miss having someone to mock, or do they actually miss me?" She didn't answer. As she turned to go, I said, "Wait." She looked back, hopeful. "I'm not making promises," I said. "But I won't block your number again. That's all I can offer." She nodded, tears in her eyes. As she stepped out into the street, Cal passed her on the way in. He glanced at me with a raised brow. "Visitor." "Ghost," I said. We went back to work. That night, I sat on the porch with Gloria, sipping tea, letting the sunset drip gold across the porch rail. "She came," I said. Gloria didn't ask who, she just nodded. And she asked. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't beg for anything. "That's a win," she said. I thought about that all night, how I'd always defined healing as something loud, something triumphant. But maybe it was just this, a quiet conversation in your own office, where you don't fold, don't flinch, don't surrender a single inch of who you've become. The next day, I received a text from my mother. "Thank you for hearing me. I meant every word." I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. 3 weeks later, a second envelope arrived, this one from the law firm. It was thick, official, stamped with gold foil lettering. I opened it alone in my studio, the morning sun casting angled light across my desk. The document inside detailed the finalized sale of Whitaker Insurance and Associates and outlined my portion of the distribution. It was substantial, enough to pay off the last of my student loans, enough to expand New Horizon into a proper agency, enough to buy a home if I wanted to. The kind of money that, if you're not careful, starts to feel like permission to forget everything that came before it. There was a handwritten letter from the firm's partner included. A note that simply said, "Your father insisted this be distributed equally." There were no caveats. The word insisted stuck with me. I didn't know what to do with that. I'd spent most of my life believing Mark Whitaker only insisted on things that reinforced control, that belittled emotion, that made sure the family revolved around him and his version of strength. But maybe I'd been wrong. Or maybe he'd just changed. Quietly. Too late. I told no one at first. Not Gloria. Not Rachel. Not even Cal. I needed time to think, to separate what was deserved from what was dangerous. The money didn't change what they'd done, but it complicated how I felt about it. For years, I'd believed cutting them off was the only way to survive. And now, here they were tiptoeing back into my life through money and soft apologies. I didn't trust it. But I also didn't want to become someone who couldn't allow for change. That was the tightrope I walked that week between boundaries and bitterness, between earned safety and what might be redemption. I sat with it. And then I talked to Cal. We were walking the trail behind the bookstore, our usual Friday evening ritual. He listened without interrupting, just nodded, and let the story settle between us like pine needles on the path. "What do you think I should do?" I finally asked. He stopped walking and turned to face me. "What do you want to do?" I hesitated. I want to accept it, but I don't want to feel like I've opened the door too wide, like this is a Trojan horse with family carved into the side. Cal grinned. "Then accept it, use it, and keep your boundaries exactly where they've been. You make it sound simple. It is simple, just not easy." The next morning, I deposited the funds into a new account, one with a name that made me smile, Horizon Expansion Fund. Within a month, I'd signed a lease on a larger space downtown, 2 floors above an old music store with exposed brick and sun-soaked windows. Gloria cried when I showed her the renovation plans. Cal offered to wire the entire tech infrastructure as his housewarming gift. We hired 2 interns from the nearby college, then an office manager, then a junior designer. New Horizon was no longer just my survival project. It was an anchor in the community, a lighthouse for other people who'd been underestimated, who'd been told be realistic one too many times. Then came the email. Subject Family Gathering, June 14th, from Diane Whitaker. "Lauren, we're hosting a small event at the house. Just family. Brett and Evan will be there with their families. Your father has decided to fully retire, and we'd like to mark the occasion. No pressure, no expectations, but you're welcome. Love, Mom." There was an address, a time, a cell number I hadn't seen before. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and didn't speak of it for 2 days. Finally, I brought it up with Gloria over tea. She stirred honey into her mug and asked, "What's your gut say? That it's a trap?" She laughed. "That's not your gut. That's trauma." I smiled weakly. "So what's the difference? Trauma says, you'll be hurt again. Your gut says, I'm strong enough to walk away if I need to. So you think I should go. I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night." I didn't RSVP. I didn't decline either. But I started thinking about what it would mean to walk back into that house, not as the daughter begging for love, but as the woman who'd built a life that no one could take credit for. A week before the event, I booked a flight to Charlotte. Economy ticket, no luggage, just a carry-on and a rental car reservation. Rachel raised an eyebrow when I told her. "Are you sure?" "No," I said, "but I'm not going there for them. I'm going to prove something to me." Cal offered to come with me. I told him no. This was something I had to do alone. The morning of the flight, I stood in front of my closet for 10 minutes, staring at my clothes, not sure what armor to wear. I chose a soft gray jumpsuit and a long tan coat. Comfortable, polished, nothing my mother could nitpick, not that I'd care anymore. I touched down in Charlotte 2 hours later, rented a hybrid sedan, and drove the familiar route to my childhood neighborhood. The houses all looked the same, bigger than they needed to be, trimmed hedges, driveway fountains. Like nothing inside could ever be out of control. But I knew better. I parked at the curb, sat in the car for 3 full minutes. Then, I stepped out, smoothed my coat, and walked up the path, like I was arriving for a business meeting. My mother opened the door. She looked surprised, but not unwelcome. "Lauren," she said, stepping back. "Hi." The house smelled the same. Sandalwood candles, furniture polish, something baked but too perfect to have been made by hand. Inside, Brett's kids were chasing each other through the kitchen. Evan's wife stood beside a cheese board, chatting with someone I didn't recognize. My father sat on the back patio, a glass of bourbon in his hand, staring out over the lawn. like it held secrets only he could decipher. When he saw me, he stood, and I felt nothing but clarity. He looked older. That was my first thought. Not frail exactly, but smaller than the man who used to fill a room with his voice alone. His shoulders sagged in a way they never had. His hands slightly trembled as he set down the bourbon. It was like someone had deflated him slightly, the air of certainty gone from his frame. "Lauren," he said. I gave a short nod. "Dad?" The silence between us wasn't hostile. It was just thick, swollen with everything unsaid. He gestured toward one of the chairs on the patio, the kind with faded cushions and wrought iron arms. I sat, keeping my back straight. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, voice lower than I remembered, like gravel that had been wet too long. "Neither did I." More silence. "I read the article," he said after a moment. "Twice. Didn't realize you subscribed to Business West." He chuckled an awkward, almost human sound. "Brett sent me the link." I nodded, waiting. "You've done well," he added. "Very well." "Thank you." He shifted in his seat. "I wasn't a good father to you." The words landed like small stones. Not a landslide, not a revelation. Just facts finally spoken aloud. "I didn't understand you," he continued. "Didn't try to. You were complicated." "No," I said. "I was inconvenient." He flinched. "You didn't like that I cried when things were unfair, that I questioned your rules, that I didn't laugh when you made me the joke." "I thought I was toughening you up," he said quietly. "You were breaking me down." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not of me exactly, but of what he'd done, of how long it had taken him to see it. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted to say it." "Good," I said. "Because I'm not here to give you anything." We sat there for a while, both of us staring out at the backyard. Brett's youngest was running barefoot across the grass, screaming with joy. I wondered what it was like to grow up in this family and still feel free enough to yell like that. "Your mother's tried," he said after a while, "to change, to see things differently." "She has," I admitted. "But change doesn't erase the damage." "No," he said, "it doesn't." I stood. "I came here to see if I could be in the same room with you and not lose myself." He looked up and, "I can." I didn't wait for him to respond. Inside the living room buzzed with conversation. Brett caught sight of me, started to walk over. Evan smiled awkwardly from the kitchen. I took a deep breath and turned toward the staircase instead. Upstairs hadn't changed. Same photos on the walls, same beige carpet, same door at the end of the hall, my old room. I opened it. The posters were gone, my furniture replaced. It was a guest room now, a queen bed with stiff linens, a lamp with no bulb, a generic painting above the headboard. Nothing of me remained. And that was the clearest metaphor I could have asked for. I stood in the doorway for another minute, then closed it quietly behind me. Back downstairs, my mother approached me again, a nervous energy fluttering around her like static. "Did you speak with your father?" "Yes." She nodded, and I heard what he had to say. She bit her lip. "Can I ask something?" I waited. If we keep reaching out slowly, respectfully, would you be open to rebuilding something?" I looked at her, really looked at her, at the lines near her eyes, the hands that had always held tension in every tendon, the softness that had finally begun to surface. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but if you do reach out again, you better mean it. No guilt trips, no rewrites of history, no pretending it wasn't as bad as it was." She swallowed. "I understand." I believed her more than I expected to, but not enough to drop my guard. I told Brett and Evan a brief hello, spoke to their partners, let the kids ask questions about the mountains and what's it like owning a company. I answered kindly, but kept my distance. I wasn't here to play catch-up. I was here to bear witness to what had changed and what hadn't. And then 2 hours after arriving, I said goodbye. I hugged my mother lightly, shook my father's hand, left the house the same way I'd entered Calm Hole on my own terms. At the rental car, I opened my phone and snapped a photo of the house, not to remember it, but to close it. Back at the hotel, I sent one message. To Gloria. "It went fine, I'm good. I'll be home tomorrow." The next morning, as the plane lifted into the sky, I looked out the window at the sprawl of Charlotte shrinking beneath the clouds. Not a home, just a city I'd once survived. When I landed, Rachel picked me up. She didn't ask a thing, just handed me a coffee and said, "Welcome back." Gloria had left a bundle of lavender on my pillow with a note that read, You did it. I breathed it in, let the calm settle over me. Then I walked into my studio, opened my laptop, and went back to work. Because Silver Glen wasn't just where I landed, it was where I rose. In the months that followed my visit to Charlotte, something shifted in me, not dramatically. Not like a door slamming shut, but like a window quietly closing before a storm. It was closure not with fanfare, but with quiet certainty. I didn't check my phone for text. I didn't replay conversations. I didn't wonder if I should have said more. I had said enough. The studio was thriving. We just landed a branding project with a regional outdoor retailer, our biggest client yet. Cal and I worked late one night, redesigning their product catalog layout, eating takeout on the office floor, with our laptops balanced on our knees. This feels real now, I said. He looked up from his screen. It was real the day you printed your first flyer in Gloria's back room. I smiled. Feels different, though. You're different, he said. You're not just surviving anymore. He was right, I wasn't. The inheritance from my parents remained untouched in its account. I hadn't used a cent of it for New Horizons expansion, even though it was tempting. Something in me needed to know I could build this entirely on my own first. That money might someday serve a purpose, but it wouldn't be what made me whole. On a warm Saturday morning in May, I stood outside the new studio with my team, 6 full-timers, 2 interns, and Cal, and took a photo for our website. We were laughing the kind of laughter that comes from shared hard work, shared wins, shared purpose. Not a performance for a photo album, not a setup for a joke. Just joy. Later that afternoon, I took the long way home. Down Main Street, past the hardware store where I'd lived above that dusty apartment, past the Oak and Quill, where Gloria now hosted weekly poetry nights that sold out without fail. I stopped for coffee at the Bluebird, where Rachel poured me a cup before I even asked, and Max, now 10 and permanently curious, rushed up to show me the science project he'd just finished. You ever miss it? He asked suddenly. Miss what I said, sipping. Where you used to live, your old house, your family. It caught me off guard. I wasn't used to kids cutting through adult hesitation. No, I said softly. Not really. Good, he said in that blunt way kids do. You're way better here. That night, Cal and I sat on the porch of my new place, a small 2-bedroom cottage with a wildflower yard and a fire pit made from stacked stone. We'd moved in 3 months earlier, after nearly 2 years of working together, and a long, slow shift from friends to something deeper. I used to think peace would feel boring, I told him as I curled into his side. He chuckled. And now it feels earned. We watched the sky turn gold, the stars appear one by one, like shy guests arriving late to a party. I thought about my life now, how every corner of it had been painted in my own colors. How the pain I carried hadn't disappeared, but had been put to work, repurposed into something useful. The next morning, I opened an email from the Business West editor, subject follow-up story. She wanted to run a second feature, a Where Are They Now, piece highlighting entrepreneurs whose businesses had continued to grow. I agreed on one condition, no family questions. I sat for the interview in the studio, our team's work displayed behind me. Sunlight pouring through the large front windows. The photographer captured me mid-laugh, which is how I appeared on page 3 of the July issue, not as a runaway or a victim or a daughter. Just as me, Lauren Whitaker, founder of New Horizon Design Studio, based in Silver Glen, Idaho. A week after the article ran, another letter arrived. This time not from my parents. It was from Evan's wife, Melissa. She wrote about how much she admired what I'd built, how she'd shown the article to their kids, who now referred to me as Cool Aunt Lauren, even though we'd never met. She said she didn't expect anything, only that if I ever wanted to reconnect with Evan's family on my terms, she'd welcome it. I sat with that one a long time, because it wasn't manipulative. It wasn't trying to fix anything. It was an open door with no pressure. In the end, I replied with a simple thank you. And I meant it. That summer, Gloria celebrated her 65th birthday with a backyard party full of people from town. I stood by the fire pit and watched her laugh in a circle of friends, wearing a ridiculous birthday sash and a tiara someone had brought as a joke. I thought about the woman who had taken me in with nothing but a phone call from Shelby and a room with a twin bed and a view of Main Street. She'd once said, "You bloom wherever you're planted." But I think she was wrong about one thing. I hadn't just bloomed. I had rooted. The past hadn't disappeared. It didn't need to. I was just no longer carrying it like a suitcase I couldn't put down. It sat behind me now like an old coat in the closet, something I no longer wore but kept as a reminder of where I'd come from and how far I'd walked. One evening in August, as Cal and I were preparing dinner, the girls from the high school internship program showed up at our door. They'd been walking by, saw the lights on, and wanted to drop off a thank you gift, 2 potted succulents, and a handwritten card with their favorite quotes from their time at New Horizon. I placed the succulents on my desk the next morning, next to the original one Gloria gave me the week I moved out of her spare room. And as I watered them, I whispered under my breath, "You made it." 16 years after the day they left me at a gas station in Silver Glen, I received a final letter. It came in a thick cream envelope, handwritten in my mother's careful script. The return address was an assisted living facility, just outside Sedona, Arizona. I hadn't heard from either of them in nearly 2 years, not since the brief Charlotte visit, and the equally brief correspondence that followed. The estate had long been settled. The money had long since sat untouched in its own separate account, still unspent, still untainted. But this letter, this felt different. I waited a full day before opening it. Not out of dread, but out of respect for myself, for the time it had taken me to no longer read her handwriting with a jolt of adrenaline. Inside was a single page. No wax seal, no monogrammed stationery. Just plain paper and words I could hear in her voice, even after all this time. Dear Lauren, by the time you read this, we've likely left this world or are close to it. I won't romanticize our story. I won't pretend we were good parents to you. What we did, especially that day in Silver Glen, was cruel. We thought we were shaping you into something stronger. What we did instead was show you that love was conditional. I am sorry, and I don't mean it in the way people say when they want to feel better. I mean it in the way that stings, that haunts. You didn't deserve it, and still you rose. We have followed your journey from a distance. Your articles, your studio, the community you built. You did what we could not. You created something whole out of brokenness. If this is the last thing I ever get to tell you, let it be this: I am proud of the woman you became. Not because of what you overcame, but because of who you were always meant to be. We've made arrangements for the last of the family estate. You'll find those details enclosed. But more than money, I hope what you find is peace. With love and remorse, Mom. There was a second-page legal documentation, a small additional transfer from the sale of the company's last remaining assets. I set it aside. It didn't matter. I read the letter again. And then one more time. And then I placed it gently into a drawer, where I kept other fragments of my past. Some photos, the original flyer from the Oak and Quill's first event, a printed copy of the Business West article. And I went back to living. Because my life didn't start with that letter. It didn't start with their apology. And it didn't need anything else from them to continue. The following weekend, Cal and I took the girls, our twin daughters Lily and Nora, to the lake just outside of town. We packed sandwiches, fruit, and juice boxes, and I watched them run down the slope of wild grass with squeals so high I could feel it in my teeth. They didn't know the full story, not yet. They knew I had grown up in another state, that I had a family I wasn't close to, that sometimes people make mistakes too big to fix with a single, "I'm sorry." But they also knew how to name every emotion. They knew sad and angry and scared were normal, welcome things. And they knew how to say no without flinching, because I taught them that, because I'd lived it. That night, as I tucked them into bed, Nora asked, "Mommy, did someone hurt your feelings when you were little?" I sat beside her. "Yes, they did. But you're not scared anymore." "No, sweet girl," I said, "because I made my own life, and now I have you." She smiled sleepily, grabbed my hand, and whispered, "I'm glad you made it." And I was. More than glad. I was proud. The next morning, I walked into the studio and stood in front of our mission wall, the hand-lettered vinyl script that every new team member passed on their way in. We build from where we've been. We rise into who we become. We create what was once unthinkable. I traced the letters with my fingertips. Then I opened my laptop, took a breath, and sent a final message to my mother's old email address. I knew she'd likely never see it, but it wasn't for her anyway. "I received your letter. Thank you. I've built something beautiful, and I'm at peace. Lauren, sometimes healing doesn't arrive in the form of apology. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a quiet morning in a town you chose, in the people who become your family, in the work you build from your pain. I spent most of my life trying to earn the love of people who saw sensitivity as weakness and humiliation as love. But what I learned after everything is that strength isn't loud. It's persistent, it's gentle, it's choosing to bloom where no one planted you. Have you ever walked away from someone who never apologized and still found peace? If this story resonated with you, share your own journey in the comments. Your voice might be the bridge someone else needs. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone. Your story matters.